Hello all, Game Methuselah. I thought I would continue again and make starting your campaign 2. Hello all, Game Methuselah. I thought I would continue again and make starting your campaign 2 to give you some more information about how I think you should get started on running a role-playing campaign. Now, there's a lot of great things out there that people have talked about in designing your own maps, and I know Matt did a bunch of live streaming and designing a whole kingdom and an adventure campaign with a map that you guys all pitched in and worked on, which I thought was really neat. The thing about it is it always has the same problem to me. There are so many maps out there, and for many years I designed my own maps because there wasn't that much out there when I started. And the ones that were out there were pretty milquetoasty, and of course I always felt that I could do better. But I found when I wrote up maps, they really weren't that good. They were pretty much vanilla and boring and dull. And a hill is a hill and a mountain is a mountain. And every once in a while you can come up with a really cool idea. But for the most part, everything was pretty much bland. Sooner or later, they started coming out with maps. Game companies had their own systems. There was Dragon Quest. They made their Illusia maps. There was a map that I have no idea who did it. I think it's a Games Workshop map, but I used it through a bunch of campaigns. I have no idea. But even then, when you have a map that's written up, it's still vanilla. Well, okay. You go to Hyboria, you can have a Conan. There's a really beautiful map in this game system. Never played the game system, but I used the map. Now, Iron Crown later came out with something, and I used it a lot. Middle-earth. Well, this I knew. I could smell Middle-earth. I understood what it was. I read The Hobbit. I read Lord of the Rings. I knew what Middle-earth looked like. More companies still come out with Middle-earth, and that was the game of my choice. And the reason was not so much as a game master, because as a game master I could know what the world looked like. But the problem is always, what do your players think? How do you engage them in a world that they really have no understanding of? And that's the point. Now, there's a lot of more improvement now in games as Wizards of the Coast has come up with Forgotten Realms and Greyhawk. All of these were available, but they now have books for them. They have Birthright, and they have all sorts of other campaign settings that you can utilize. Pathfinder from Pazio and all the modules they made make some great unique worlds that you can really immerse yourself in. Still, the problem is the same. Do your players know the world they're playing in? And that's a problem. Once you've written a world and you understand it, that's great, but can you share that knowledge and love with other players? Now, Matt Colville, as I'm sure many of you know, has been over 10 years had a world that he designed. It's in the 2 books that he's produced that I'm sure a lot of you have read. He has 3 more books that he's going to be writing, all based in this same world. It's a really deep, immersive world. I ran 4 or 5 different adventures in 2 or 3 different campaigns in his world. Jordy also ran a campaign in his world. But did we ever scratch the surface? More importantly, did the players ever understand it? And that's the issue. And the thing I think you need to do, if you're not a writer like Matt Colville and you haven't written an entire world, or you're not J.R.R. Tolkien, or any of these other people who've sat down and detailed out their entire kingdom, don't bother. Steal theirs. I mean, I'm writing a game now for the Twilight of Fae, set in the ancient world of Albion, which is ancient England, where the elves still rule. In my mind, it's beautiful, and I see every visage, and I know the feelings and the colors and the smells, and I know what the protagonists think and feel. And maybe I can get it across. As Matt said, it's more than likely the most successful campaign I ever ran, because I loved it, and that love came across in me playing the games with my friends. So they ended up learning about it, and they loved it, and they became immersed in the campaign. And that's what you want. So the suggestions I make to you is find a system that you love. If you like Matt Colville, find out about his world, read his books, and run it. There's plenty of documentation out there. He's made maps. I'm sure they're gettable. And now you can run in the same world that he runs in. For those of you who love Critical Role, and I know there's one or two of you out there, you can go on Amazon Prime right now, or just play Amazon, and buy his campaign setting. Your players' heroes who have watched now Critical Role for years, they know this world. They know these heroes. They've watched them. You have some really nice built-in NPCs you can abscond with and add to your world. Characters that can drive your stories forth that your players know intimately. And that's what you should do. If you don't have Poul Anderson's Broken Sword like I did, or if you don't have the myriad of Conan novels, or Lord of the Rings, which is what I was so immersed with, and that if someone was out going to run a Middle-earth game or through Iron Crown or something else out there in Southern California, and we're looking for players, I would be all over it. Not necessarily wanting to run it, but I want to play it. Because when I build a character, I know he belongs in this world. And I know I understand the world. I can feel it. You guys even have the advantage of now, as do I, have seen multiple movies on Middle-earth. And you can have an ideal of twirling dwarves and other unusual situations that exist in Middle-earth that I didn't really think about. But they can now be there. Take what you like as a DM and build it into your stories, into your adventures, into your campaign. But don't necessarily make it the world. Take somebody else's world where they can describe the inns and the pubs and the villages and the cities, or take something historical. I love running Ancients, where you walk into ancient Athens and you know what it smells like, or you're in Rome, and that's an understandable concept for people. They get that. They know what that feels like. When my players come into Londinium in the world of Albion and they see the Roman troops building the battlements to hold back the evil barbarians, who some people think might not even be human, my players can get a grip on that because they've had historical documentation of what this world looks like. There's lots of great stuff out there for different campaigns. If you're a fan of Critical Role, like I said, steal liberally from them. I don't think Matt Mercer would mind. If you come up with something fabulous, you make the most incredible story, send it to him. Nothing motivates a game master more than a really wonderful role-playing encounter, campaign, or game. Most players I know when they're DMs and they get burned out, like me and Matt and all the friends I have in my groups, Don Hawthorne and all these people, yeah, they're burned out. Oh, they've done so much. It's been so many years. Suddenly you run an exciting game and they're down scribbling out maps and writing out adventures and on the computer coming up with bad guys and a whole myriad of connective tissue that's going to bring these adventures to life. But if you want to make it easy on yourself, pick a world that your players know, that they're going to fall in love with. If you're a great fan of World of Warcraft like I am, and you played years of it, and you know the world and you know everything else, well, there's a campaign book for that as well. But if nothing else, you have all the computer games. So you have all the immersive world that your players can look at every day. And you pick a little square of the world and make it your own. Develop your own little sinister bad guys and missions and evil doings that they're trying to cause strife between good and evil, friend and foe, however you want to do it. But when you run a world that your players know, they're going to be so much more involved. There's nothing, I can tell you, that made it more exciting for me than to run 4th Age, Middle-earth, Mines of Moria, and then sneaking into Mirkwood to try to get into the woodland realms and get aid. And there's lots of content out for that. And people playing in your games will know it. They'll embrace it. And you won't have to sell it. You won't have to get them to, become involved and become immersed. You let them become immersed. Well, what are you? Well, I'm one of the last surviving lords of Cardellane. Okay, That's a good backstory. If you're running with multiple game masters, it's really great because everybody can take an area and they're not going to step on each other's toes. They can still travel throughout the various realms, but they're not going to get in your way. They're not going to ruin your story. As I've told you before, and I know you've heard, my most successful campaigns have all been in a shared world. We used the Judges Guild from the mid-70s, original TSR D&D maps, because, well, they were the best and really pretty much only thing on the market. And I used them for decades because I loved them and, well, nobody ever used them. But in one of the maps, there was a little town called Tain, and that became our home base. And from that point, Dawn ran Utumno, the great dark horde of orcs and trolls and dark forces that were trying to menace the world. And we found out that one of our arch enemies, the great overlord, was really the true king. So my paladin swears fealty to him, only to find out that his wife, the great high elf, the bond of the high elves and humans together, was not a high elf at all, but a drow, working to divisively destroy worlds, and that this lord who we had hated, well, he was really a just and fair king, just being beguiled by this drow. A whole series of missions to take place to free him from this control. This is what you can use. I don't have to make the mountains and the rivers. That part is already all seen. And then in my part of the campaign, well, I had the undeads, Tol Mor, the necromancer that came out of a board game, and the vampire king. The necromancer was killed by paladins and driven into hell, and the vampire king finds a way to gain the golden leash of Cerberus, capture Cerberus and remove him so he can travel into hell to release the undead master and bring him out into the world. And as he comes out, he takes the lantern of hell with him. So now anybody who dies doesn't follow the light into hell, but follows the light into the service of the necromantic lords. And every battle that gets fought, where 20,000 undead are beaten back by a force of knights, but they lose 10,000, the next morning there's an extra 1,000 in the ranks of the undead, and they are back to fight again. And this led to climactic battles, huge finales, great stories, because people knew the world. I did not have to explain it. I didn't have to tell them what these mountains and woods were. That was already written for them. I think this is the best way to start a campaign, especially if you're new. Get a system that you really know and love, that your players know and love. Again, modern day, you have Oncomings of Matt Colville and the stories he's written, and you surely have Critical Role with Matt Mercer, or anything else out there that you really like. Ancients, there's lots of the ancient mythologies always being done. I still love Lord of the Rings. That's always there. Grab those, use those, share them, and your players can come in knowing, and let them drive the color of the world into your game. In mythology in ancient Egypt, you have ancient Egyptians traveling to try to stop the Trojan War. So many things can happen in real life. I love campaigns that use the real world because you have real historical events that can be intertwined and mixed with fantasy to make a really mythical story that your players can become totally involved in. The rest I don't have to share with you. You've already heard it. You draw the maps, you make up the monsters, you make your campaigns really good, you put them in this backdrop that everybody's familiar with, and the campaigns are going to drive themselves. Lots more I want to talk about running stuff, but I wanted to get this going and give you some basic philosophy I try to use all the time when I'm running games. A little bit of truth, a little bit of myth, a little bit of imagination, and you can come up with the best campaigns and best adventures for your players every time. So until I get a chance to speak with you again, fight me, devils, fight, for as you know, I hate peace. Game on.